Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This is the AWS CloudWatch lecture and it's both theoretical and a lab as well, so you will need to log into the AWS console. So what is AWS CloudWatch? Well, hopefully you've already got an associate level certificate and you know what this is, but essentially it's a monitoring service for AWS cloud resources and the applications you run on AWS. And that actual definition really understates CloudWatch because it does an awful lot of things, which we will learn about in this lecture. So what does it enable you to do? It enables you to do resource utilization, operational performance monitoring. And what does that actually mean? Well, you can go in and monitor things like your CPU utilization. You can monitor your disk I/O, your network throughput. You can monitor all kinds of custom things. So you can monitor the amount of disk space that's left on your EBS volumes. You can literally monitor basically anything that you can program in Python. As well as doing that, you can do log aggregation and basic analysis of CloudWatch. And essentially, CloudWatch provides real-time monitoring within AWS for resources and applications, and it hooks into event triggers. And we'll have a look at how that all works in a second. So there's three key components to CloudWatch. There's CloudWatch itself, there's CloudWatch logs, and then there's CloudWatch events. And we're going to go through and explore each one individually. So let's start with CloudWatch. CloudWatch allows you to do a few things. It's real time, depending on whether or not you've got detailed monitoring turned on or just standard monitoring. Standard monitoring is every 5 minutes. Detailed monitoring is every 1 minute. You get a whole bunch of different metrics. So you can have CPU utilization, you can have network utilization, etc. You can then configure alarms. So if your CPU is going over 80% for a consistent period of time, let's say about 5 or 10 minutes, something is going to go wrong. It's going to trigger an alarm that can then trigger a notification. So it could be an SNS notification, etc. And then you can also create custom metrics. So anything that you can basically program, you can pass those notifications over to the CloudWatch API, and then CloudWatch will monitor that. So you could monitor disk space utilization, you could monitor RAM utilization, you could do really funky things inside Apache. It really depends up to you. So long as you've got the ability to program it, you can pass those metrics along to the AWS CloudWatch API. Cool thing about CloudWatch is that it doesn't have to be EC2 servers. So you could do your on-premise servers could be completely monitored by CloudWatch as well. You've just got to pass it the metrics. So let's go have a look at what it looks like in the console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console. If we go over to services and we go down to management tools, you'll be able to see CloudWatch. So go ahead and click on that. And that will load the CloudWatch dashboard, or will actually load the CloudWatch landing page. So like I said, in here you can see that we've got dashboards, we've got alarms, we've got events, we've got logs, and we've got metrics. Let's start off with dashboards. So we're going to go in and create a dashboard. I'm just going to call this My A Cloud Guru DB, something like that, and create our dashboard. And the dashboards consist of different widgets. So what is it that you want to go in and monitor? So let's compare, you can monitor a whole bunch of different things. So you could compare metrics over time. You can compare the total over time. So you can have a stacked area. You can instantly see a number. So maybe how many EC2 instances that you're running in a particular auto-scaling group. And then you can add text in here. I'm just going to add in some lines and go ahead and hit configure. Now, straight away, you can see we've got our CloudWatch graph, but it's empty. We need to select some metrics to appear here. So what metrics is it that we want to monitor? So let's go in and monitor some metrics on EC2. And I want to monitor across all instances, or you could do it by auto-scaling group or by AMI ID or a per instance metric. I'm going to say across all instances, and I want to see my CPU utilization. So you go ahead and create this widget, and this widget will be added to your dashboard. Now, right now, I don't actually have any EC2 instances running. So this is a dummy account, but if you did have EC2 instances running, you would be able to see the data in here. Next thing we can go and do is go into alarms, and we can create an alarm. You can see here I've got a billing alarm. I would definitely recommend that you create one of those for your test AWS account. So you go in and hit create alarm, and then you go ahead and select your metric. So what we can do is we can do an alarm based off our CPU utilization. So to do that, we go down to EC2 metrics. We probably want on a per instance metric, and click in here. and then you can see here there's one instance ID. So I want to do the CPU utilization here for this particular instance, and we can go ahead and create an alarm for that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and the name I'm going to say alarm over 85% or whatever. 85%, and we'll do that as its description. And so essentially we're going to say when CPU utilization is greater than or equal to, and then we'll say 85 for one consecutive period. What's a consecutive period? Well, you define that down here. So for 5 minutes, do you want it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, etc.? I'm just going to do it for 5. And then what is it that you want? What action do you want to take? So in here, we could say state is alarm, select a notification list. We can enter a new list. So we can essentially create an SNS notification. So our email list, you put your email address in here, and then you could go ahead and create the alarm. I'm not going to do that because I don't particularly want this. I don't want to be bothered by Amazon all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. I've just gone back to metrics. It's important to note that you can create custom metrics in here. You just need to start passing data back to the AWS API. Again, it's beyond the scopes of this course how we do it. We do cover that off in the SysOps Administrator Associate course, where we'll go in and create a custom metric around RAM utilization using Python and a little script that we install on an EC2 instance. So if you are interested in finding that out, go check out our SysOps Administrator Associate course. So we've covered off CloudWatch itself. The next is CloudWatch logs, and this is basically where you can push your logs from AWS services, including CloudTrail, and we'll go through an example of that in a second. You can push these, to CloudWatch, and it will log all the information for you. So you can also log information from your applications, from EC2 instances, whatever it is you want. In terms of application logging, you could monitor HTTP response codes to your Apache logs. You could receive alarms for errors in your kernel logs, or you could count exceptions in your applications logs. So you can log just about anything. You've just got to script it. In order to do this, you need to go in and create a log group. And essentially, you can search through the logs and look for specific metrics. So like I just said, if you want to see your HTTP response codes from Apache, you could go through and search for that metric. And it's stored indefinitely. It's not actually even stored in an S3 bucket like we saw with CloudTrail. It's stored within CloudWatch logs. Now, probably behind the scenes, it's using S3, but we don't know that for sure. So that's what CloudWatch logs is. Let's go have a look at it in the console. Okay, so I'm back in the console. If we just go over to logs in here, we can start aggregating and monitoring and storing our logs. So we can monitor basically anything. So HTTP response codes from our Apache logs, alarms for errors in the kernel, count exceptions in application logs, etc. To go ahead and do this, what we need to do is we need to create a log group, and then we essentially install an agent on our EC2 instances or on our on-premise instances. That will then push it out to CloudWatch's API, and then we'll be able to monitor those logs and be able to view the log data that we've sent into CloudWatch logs. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and do this. Again, it's beyond the scope of this course, but it is really, really simple. Just click up here if you want to go do it on an EC2 instance. I don't really want to waste your time on it, but it is pretty simple. And then finally, we've got CloudWatch events. Now, before I go through CloudWatch events, I thought we'd actually just take a look at a very practical example. So we've just finished up on the CloudTrail lectures. So we use the example of a user. They're making API calls to the control plane. This is any public API that Amazon have. And essentially, we've got CloudTrail down here, and it's monitoring, or it's basically logging those API calls to an S3 bucket. Now, what you can actually set up is you can set this up so that it also passes it on to CloudWatch, into CloudWatch events. So essentially what happens is, let's say our user goes in and provisions an EC2 instance. That then will be logged by CloudTrail. We can actually select CloudTrail as an event source, and we can push that into CloudWatch events, and we can configure a whole bunch of rules. So if we get a rule saying, saying, oh, look, there's been an API call used to provision an EC2 instance. How has that happened? Like, there shouldn't be, for some reason, we don't want this particular user provisioning EC2 instances. What happens is we then define an event target, and we can use a whole bunch of different AWS services to respond to this event. And it's essentially event-driven security. So we could have Lambda go in and delete that EC2 instance automatically. So this is one way we could go in and use CloudWatch events to essentially secure our AWS environment. So let's go through CloudWatch events. It has near real-time stream of system events. With the events are basically make up of AWS resources state change. So you could say, okay, what happens if this EC2 instance is stopped? Do we have an event? Do we respond to that by automatically triggering a Lambda function to go in and start that EC2 instance? In my example, we just used AWS CloudTrail. So what happens if someone is using API calls to provision like really big EC2 instances? Do we go in and terminate them? We can have custom events. So you can go in and just basically look for specific codes. So like within your Apache logs, for example, if you're getting certain HTTP status codes, maybe you could have an event that responds to that using different rules. We can also have scheduled events as well. And so our rules essentially match the incoming events and route them back to one or more targets. So our targets are going to be things like AWS Lambda functions or SNS topics or SQS queues or Kinesis streams. So maybe you just want an SNS notification if someone in your team has gone in and provisioned an EC2 instance. You can create that using both CloudTrail and CloudWatch events. So let's have a look at CloudWatch events in the inside the console. So we go in here, and essentially what we're going to do is determine the events of interest in CloudWatch event stream. We're then going to create a whole bunch of rules to select the events of interest, and then we're going to specify an action to take when a rule matches an event. So you can go in and create a rule. In here we've got our event pattern, so we can do to build our event patterns to match any events by service. So here we go, we create our rule. Now our rule can have a couple of different event sources. So we could do an event pattern. So we could be looking for an API call to provision an EC2 instance that would meet a certain pattern. Or we could actually schedule an event. So we could just say we need it to do this at this particular time at this particular day. I'm going to say event pattern. The service name in here, you can go in and grab whatever service that the event pattern is going to match. So you scroll down, there's a whole bunch of them. We could go ahead and do CloudTrail, for example, and then the event pattern preview. So what's it going to look like? At the moment, it's all events. We can go in and configure this, edit it, and make it look for EC2 instances, for example. Then go and add our targets. So straight away, we've got a custom Lambda function as defined. So we could go in and say, okay, if we see an EC2 instance being provisioned, we're going to have our Lambda function that will automatically go in and delete that. And you can see down here, we've got a whole bunch of different targets. So you don't need to understand, or you don't need to memorize what the different services are that you can have as an event source, or what the different targets are that you can have, but you just need to understand at a high level how this works. You can basically have CloudWatch events have a whole bunch of rules, and you can create this event driven, you can have event driven security to respond to things automatically. So you could be asleep, somebody goes in, provisions an EC2 instance, and straight away CloudWatch events is going out and saying, no, you're not allowed to do that. It breaks my rules. I'm going to trigger this Lambda function, which will then go in and react to what it is you're doing. So moving on, how do we control who can access CloudWatch and what they can do? Well, it's just the same as what we looked at in the last lectures in CloudTrail. You can use IAM policies to restrict access to CloudWatch and the actions that they can perform. However, be aware that data is decoupled from its source, therefore you're not able to restrict access by the originating resource. You're going to have to, restrict access to to CloudWatch itself. How are unauthorized users prevented from accessing CloudWatch? Essentially, they need to be authenticated with AWS, and they need to have the appropriate permissions, which is set via identity access management policies. All AWS APIs use signed requests via HTTPS or SSL to help mitigate a man-in-the-middle attacks, so you can't do a man-in-the-middle attack to an AWS public API. And before you go in and take your exam, I definitely recommend reading the AWS CloudWatch FAQs. CloudWatch and CloudTrail make up by far, honestly, like 60% of your exam questions at least. You would be very well advised to go in and read about CloudWatch and CloudTrail before sitting the exam. So what are my exam tips? Just remember the key components. You've got CloudWatch itself, you've got CloudWatch logs, and you've got CloudWatch events. CloudWatch itself is real time. It gives you metrics in terms of dashboards and widgets. You can set alarms, you can set notifications, you can even set custom metrics, so things like hard disk utilization, etc. So moving on to CloudWatch logs, these are pushed from some AWS services, including CloudTrail. It could also be from your own custom applications and systems. You could have your own API and be pushing out logs to it. It could be somewhere, it could be completely external to AWS. You could be pushing out logs from agents installed on your on-premise servers, and you can actually search for strings inside the log entries, and so you could look for certain error conditions. So let's say you want to know how many times you're getting a 500 error, your users are inside your Apache log, something like that. You could also then create a notification so that if you're getting over 400, 500 errors, something like that, or maybe over 100 404 errors, something like that, it will send out a notification to you. And the logs are stored indefinitely. They're not stored, they're not stored in S3 like CloudTrail. You don't have an S3 bucket, but it probably is using S3 on the back end. It's just not user S3. And then finally, we move on to CloudWatch events. So these essentially give you near real-time streams of system events, and then the events could consist of AWS resource state changes, so maybe an EC2 instance suddenly stops, or it could be CloudTrail logs, so it could be API calls, it could be someone's gone in and provisioned an EC2 instance, and they might be Bitcoin mining, and then you can basically go in and configure a whole bunch of rules saying, right, if this happens, then go do this, go use this target, maybe we have a AWS Lambda function that goes in and then terminates those EC2 instances. So you can create event-driven security using a combination of CloudWatch and CloudWatch events, as well as Lambda and your various different targets. So that is it for this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.